Hello everyone, I'm JG. Welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm reviewing the fourth studio album from Kendrick Lamar, Damn. Kendrick's fourth studio album has been long awaited. Kendrick, of course, being one of the biggest names in hip-hop music right now, both in terms of being, a quality artist and a popular artist. He's managed to be both, provide some very great lyrics, great beats, just overall fantastic music, while at the same time remaining popular, which isn't very common, I guess you could say, in this modern time. Lots of time the artists that are really popular aren't the, the best in quality, and, vice versa. The best rappers aren't always the most popular. However, Kendrick has always managed to be both, and on this project he kind of expands on this a bit because this project is quite different from his previous works, To Pimp A Butterfly, Good Kid, Mad City, and all of his other previous efforts. Now, I've been a big fan of Kendrick Lamar for a while. I really liked his previous albums, especially To Pimp A Butterfly and Good Kid, Mad City. Those are probably two favorite albums from him so far, and with good reason. I really love his storytelling style, I really love his beat selection, all that kind of stuff that I just really like. And on Damn here, he's changing things up a bit. Now, on his previous albums, his method of storytelling is a bit more straightforward in my opinion, especially on Good Kid, Mad City, where it feels more like a linear story. And, on Cymbal Butterfly, it's not quite that way, but it's still, if you have some sense, it's pretty easy to figure out what's going on and what message he's trying to deliver. However, on Damn, that's not really the case. When listening to this album, it's very apparent that some of these tracks are meant to be, put together. Of course, all the songs on this album are just kind of one-word titles in all caps ending with a period. And, they all tend to be kind of these big concept or things of that matter, kind of like God, love, lust, things like that. However, looking at that, of course, as I said before, love and lust, those are just an example of some of these tracks that seem to be opposites of each other. And, having some other tracks that are related, kind of like blood and DNA. These tracks, of course, clearly have some kind of connection based on the title. However, how some of these, connected tracks fit in with each other in the grand context of the album isn't super clear upon first listen. Though with multiple listens, I think I was able to figure out exactly what this album was kind of going for. And, really what I think that is it's a more personal effort for Kendrick. I feel like it's less political than The Pimp A Butterfly, which was, very political. And in terms of storytelling, Good Kid, Mad City was also, very, personal, story-driven, because it was kind of based on his life growing up. However, this album isn't so much about growing up, it's more about him right now, like right here in 2017, exactly what he's feeling. And what he's feeling, or at least what I think he's feeling based on all these tracks, is, a lot of anger, a lot of confusion, and a lot of sadness, because this album doesn't really have too many happy moments on it. It kind of bounces back and forth between those previously mentioned emotions that I said before. And pride is another thing that I also feel is, very common here on this album. Kendrick, as I mentioned before earlier in the review, that he's kind of at this, peak in the whole rap game right now in terms of popularity and, quality. And, he's kind of at the top right now, and he's, he knows that lots of people think that about him, and he kind of thinks it himself. And at times I feel like he's trying to balance out between, trying to put out another great record for his fans and, trying to be humble about it, and at the same time, trying to put these other rappers that are trying to challenge him into their place. On the track Humble, we see Kendrick kind of, conflicted about, being humble and being prideful. He's saying, of course, to be humble, but he's being quite the opposite of that throughout the track's lyrics, and, kind of this, bragging sort of style that he brings on this track. Lots of people think he's taking shots at Big Sean here. That's definitely possible. He also takes shots at other rappers, I think, on tracks like Element, where he seems to be kind of challenging other rappers, or maybe he's also challenging Fox News, who he does kind of call out on this album. On the opening track of Blood, he plays a sample from some Fox News interview that's talking bad about him, saying that his lyrics, stuff like that, are doing worse for the African-American community than racism, which I don't really think is, a good statement to make, or a very logical one. And he's kind of, proving them wrong on tracks like DNA, where he's also going after them, and saying how he's kind of great, he's great, and that's kind of, just kind of in him from the start. It's part of his DNA almost. While those tracks I just mentioned, show a very kind of tough side of Kendrick, a more, going after anyone who kind of gets in his way kind of Kendrick, there's some other tracks that kind of, reveal his feelings a bit more, such as the track Feel, of course, where he's just kind of going off about all these things that he feels. He feels very vulnerable on this track, which I kind of like. And also the track Fear, where he's kind of listing off all of his fears. I really like this track. It's the longest song here on the album. I know Kendrick has, had very long songs before on his projects, and this one kind of follows in their greatness. It's just an overall very good song. So overall, throughout this project, Kendrick is just really kind of conflicted, between love, lust, pride and being humble, all these kind of things. And, it just kind of reveals his anger and kind of, sadness at this time in his life. And I feel just kind of throughout this project isn't quite as cohesive as his previous efforts, which were very cohesive in my opinion. This is all over the place in terms of the beat selection and, kind of the lyrics at times. And I feel like that's somewhat intentional. He's kind of reflecting his own mental state, which is, all over the place. He's angry at times, he's sad, he's trying to keep up with his success, trying to, improve, make another great album after To Pimp A Butterfly. He has all these things going on in his life. He's got religion, all these things, and he's trying to balance them all. And, of course, he's been balancing all these things. He's failing at some areas at certain times, and he's just trying to express all his frustration with this. That's kind of what I feel like this album is about, in my opinion. Of course, you can feel free to have your own opinion on that. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what this album is about. I know lots of people have, but I'm not going to be one of those people that's like, listen, you got to listen to the album backwards a certain amount of times, and you could find the cure to cancer in the lyrics or something like that that doesn't even make any sense. But, another interesting aspect about this album, in my opinion, and something that really shows Kendrick's growth as an artist, is kind of his take on religion on this album. Now, Kendrick, on his previous efforts, has, kind of revealed himself to be a religious person, have religious beliefs, particularly rooted in Christianity, I believe, kind of based on what I've heard from his lyrics. However, here, he seems to be a bit more questioning about his religion, a bit more curious as to why all these bad things seem to be happening to him, despite, his beliefs. And, he's not completely denouncing religion or anything like that, but it's definitely a change from his previous perspective on religion. And, on tracks here like Fear and God and all that kind of stuff, he's talking about religion. It's not something that's super prominent throughout this project as a whole, but it's just something I noticed and I thought was really interesting. And another thing is politics. Now, To Pimp A Butterfly was a very political album, and his previous efforts had hints of politics, scattered throughout. And here it's kind of the same. It's not a super political effort, which is interesting considering I thought it may be, considering, the state of politics right now, considering Donald Trump is now in office. He really has a few passing remarks about that throughout this album, as he did on the Hard Part 4, the promotional single that was released, before this project. However, it doesn't really take over and become something in the forefront here on this project. It's more like another thing that's, kind of leading to this anger and frustration that he feels right now. And, in terms of more politics, there's also that whole Fox News thing that I mentioned earlier. They play the snippet at the end of the first track, and then throughout the rest of the album, he mentions it at times, Fox News, he's kind of going after them at moments. Now, I mentioned the opening track, Blood, a lot throughout this review in terms of that, Fox News snippet, but, there's also another really interesting part about this and how it starts off the album. The track isn't really much of a song. It does have, a beat going onto it, but it's kind of Kendrick talking, and he's, he sees this old woman, and he's like, can I help you, or stuff like that, and then he's like, have you lost something, and she's like, you have lost something in your life, and then, she shoots him, and he kind of dies there, which is kind of an interesting way to start this project, and, it gets you really invested into this album immediately. And then the closing track here, Duckworth, I really like this track because it reminds me of some of his earlier, more story-based stuff, like from Good Kid, Mad City or Section 80, where he's kind of, talking about how he came to be, I guess you could say. That's a good way to put it. Maybe like a prequel to Good Kid, Mad City, but, not really fitting into the concept of that album. But, kind of what happened before, what led to Kendrick, being what he is now, what led to him even existing at all. And I think it's a really kind of interesting way to close out the album, considering the start of the album was him dying, and at the end it's talking about his birth, I guess you could say, or what would lead to him existing. It's interesting. Now, the beats on this album are different from Kendrick's previous efforts, as I said before. It's different than the jazzy sort of beats that were found on To Pimp A Butterfly. This time it goes for a more mainstream sound, I guess you could say, some more trap-influenced stuff. But however, it's not super, mainstream or anything like that, that you feel that it's something you could hear on the radio. It definitely has a bit more personality to it, in my opinion. And it kind of shows that Kendrick can be over these more mainstream type beats, but in a way that's still maintaining his own, essence, his own lyrical ability, kind of showing himself to be better than, the more mainstream artists while playing in their own type of style, which I think is interesting. Now, the beats here are also a very mixed bag in terms of what you're going to get. There's some more bouncy type stuff, kind of like Humble, the lead single here, which was produced by Mike Will Made It, as well as some other tracks here. And, I normally hate his production. So the fact that I like these tracks makes me think that he's one of those people that just doesn't try, but actually is talented if he actually does try, and he saves his, attempts to try for when he's working with really good artists like Kendrick here. And that just makes me say, come on, dude, get it together. Always try. Because, his beats here I think are really good. I also really like the beat on Triple X, which has this siren sound that goes off. I just think it's really, really cool. And also the beat on DNA, how it kind of switches up towards the halfway through the track, really, really cool. It just, brings out Kendrick, going a bit harder into the track halfway through. I think that's really cool. Now I want to talk about some of the featured artists on this project. The track Loyalty features Rihanna, who I'm not really a fan of, but I think she fits the track well here. It's alright. And then the track Love features Zakari, who I honestly hadn't heard of before this project. I don't even know anything else from Zakari besides this track. And their voice is alright, I guess. I'm not really a big fan of the track Love. It sounds a bit more poppy, but it fits, I guess. And then the track Triple X, which features U2, which was honestly the most confusing feature when I first saw the track listing here. Because, I like U2 and all, and I like Kendrick, but they're not really artists I really see ever working together in a way that I think works. But it's actually executed really well, in my opinion. The U2 parts are used very sparingly. It's not like a complete collaboration between U2 and Kendrick where they're each doing about like 50% of the track. It's definitely more Kendrick, and U2 is used sparingly throughout. But the way it's used is very well done, in my opinion. Now, if I had any complaints about this album, it would definitely have to be some of the consistency within the track listing. And I mentioned before that it seemed like he was going for a concept of, less consistency, kind of being scatterbrained and all over the place in terms of the concepts being portrayed here. But I feel like that combined with the mixed type of beats that you see, there's some more laid-back beats, there's some more upbeat beats, as I mentioned before, and, I think that kind of combined with the different lyrics, it makes for a project that's not very cohesive all the way through. At times, this album feels like a mixtape when you're listening to it, just with the way that it's all structured. It reminds me a lot of a mixtape, which isn't awful, but it's not quite as good as having a full flowing project, which is something I definitely prefer. That's really just personal preference, though. If you prefer this kind of format and you really like how that supports the whole lyrical concept of everything kind of being all over the place, then maybe you don't mind. There's also some tracks I'm just not a big fan of, like Love that I mentioned earlier. It's just a bit too poppy really for me. And Loyalty also isn't one of my favorites here. I just feel like it's a more basic track here on the album, but it's not a bad track by any means. Neither is Love, honestly. And before I wrap up this review, I want to mention something else, the album cover, which is not something I normally mention in my reviews because it's really not related to the music itself. However, when I first saw this album cover a few days before this album was released, whenever he released it officially, I was a bit confused because, the album cover is really simple, very, it's just him behind the whatever brick wall is behind him, and then the album title, that's it, really. And it looks really simplistic. It looks almost like a mixtape album cover, which, I mentioned earlier, the track listing kind of feels like a mixtape at times, which, really kind of connects the two, I guess you could say. Now, at first I didn't really like the album cover because it was sort of simplistic, kind of amateur looking in my opinion. But after listening to this album a lot, and, of course, looking at the album cover while listening to it, I feel like it kind of fits in a sense, just how Kendrick looks sort of depressed and upset on the album cover. I think it really just kind of reflects how he's feeling on this album itself. I know it's kind of weird because it's technically still not a good album cover. It still is really, basic and amateur looking, but I still can't help feel that it's kind of meshes well with the music on the project. So, yeah. I think that about sums up my opinions on this album as a whole. It definitely was a lot to digest. I spent more days than usual, just listening to this album, especially with, all the lyrical content at first. I was just no idea what was going on with these songs and where they fit into a concept or anything like that. But after multiple listens, I think it definitely clicked for me. And overall, I think this is a very good album, in my opinion. I don't like it quite as much as Good Kid, Mad City or To Pimp A Butterfly, but I still think it is a very good album. And of course, after To Pimp A Butterfly, there's not really, Kendrick has a very high, goal to reach if he wants to top that album. So the fact that this album is just good, in my opinion, above average, definitely way above average in my opinion, but, the fact that it is this good is still a very good thing. I mean, topping To Pimp A Butterfly is difficult in my opinion, so the fact that he didn't do that here, in my opinion, doesn't really bother me that much. If you're a Kendrick fan, you definitely need to check this out, though you probably already have. If you're new to hip-hop and you haven't listened to Kendrick Lamar yet, what are you doing? You need to, and this may be, this is a decent place to start in my opinion. Songs like Humble and some of the other, more straightforward tracks are a good way to get introduced to him because, this album doesn't flow like any of his other albums in terms of chronological order or something like that. It's just more, these individual tracks that overall, in the grand scheme of things, their separateness kind of brings them together, if that makes any sense at all. But yeah, overall, great album. You need to check it out. Highly recommend it. If you have anything you'd like to say, leave it down in the comment section below. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed this review. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, please, and stay golden.